G'day and welcome to another episode of 4-wheel drive DIY. Now, one of the most common additions to a 4-wheel drive these days is extra batteries, be it an extra crank battery or extra deep cycles in order to take along all the stuff for the kids, the telly, the wife, all that sort of stuff needs to go along with you. So more batteries are being fitted to more 4-wheel drives these days. But before you do that, you need to know some simple things about batteries. So stay tuned and we'll go over what you need to know before you fit batteries. Before we get started, there are three common terms you need to know so you can actually do any form of work on an electrical system. These are your volts, your amps and your watts. Now, a lot of people get some form of idea what these are, but here we go, we'll go with some dictionary definitions. Volts, the SI unit of electromotive force, the difference of potential that would carry 1 amp of current against 1 ohm of resistance. Now, to the average person that means nothing. Now, realistically, in your car, you really only need to know this. Most cars and 4-wheel drives in Australia are either 12 or 24 volts. Now, it's quite easy to tell because generally when you pop the bonnet, a 24 volt system will have a bunch of stickers everywhere or on every electrical part saying, warning, this system is 24 volts. Because for cars, it's normally 12. Now we're going with the definition of watts. The SI unit of power equivalent to 1 joule per second, corresponding to the rate of consumption of energy in an electric circuit where the potential difference is 1 volt and the current 1 amp. What this means is how much power you actually goddamn use. So if you've got a 1000 watt light bar, then it's using 1000 watts. And now amps. A unit of electric current equal to a flow of 1 coulomb per second. I don't even know what a coulomb is, but I do know that if you want to get X amount of watts of power, so say you've got a light bar and you want to get X amount of watts out for a 12 volt system, you'll be having so many amps. Now we'll get to that in a second. Another quick way to know this is if you look back to our how to rate a light bar for watts and amps episode that we did earlier, you should be able to click up here and you'll pause this video, take you to that video, you can watch that and then come back to this tab and watch this video again. Now, on to batteries. There are three common types of batteries you can get. The most common being lead acid. Now, lead acid battery was invented in 1859 by a French bloke called Gaston Plant. No, he's not the same Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, for those of you that have kids or are old enough to actually remember Gaston. Now, lead acid batteries, conventional lead acid batteries are great where you're trying to draw a high amp load or high draw on them for a very short period of time. So, generally 30 seconds, because this is where you get your crank amps from, is high draw, low time. Now, this is great for cranking, winching, those sort of things where you're putting a high amount of load onto your battery, but you're only doing it for a short period of time. So when you crank your car, generally you're not going to be cranking for more than 10-15 seconds. And if you're winching, generally your duty cycle of your winch will stop you from winching for more than 30 seconds at a time. Now, next sort of battery is an AGM battery or an absorbed glass mat. Now what they do with these is they grab very, very thin glass wires and they weave them all together like you'd find in a fine fancy rug or something, and then they basically impregnate into these mats all the electrolyte that you need to run the battery. Now, these plates also in AGM can also be any size. They can be flat, they can be rolled up into a tube, they can be anything. That is why you can get so many different looking AGM batteries. But conventionally they are all built to the same size as your average lead acid battery, so they can be a direct swap. And then you have maintenance-free gel batteries. These are absolutely awesome. Now, gel batteries are still a plate and electrolyte system, except the antimony in the lead plates is replaced with calcium, and they replace the sulfuric acid with fumed silica, or they fuse it with fumed silica to make the whole lot a jelly type substance and make it completely immobile. Now, the beauty of a gel battery is that they can be arranged in almost any configuration like an AGM battery, so you can fit them into every nook and cranny in your car and have custom shaped size batteries to suit different purposes and to utilise the wasted space in your car. So, I'm sure a lot of you are asking now, how do you measure a battery to know the difference and how good it actually is? And I know some of you probably just clicked on this video to find this bit out, so For those of you that sat through the last bit, sorry. Now, cold cranking amps is the most common metric you will see when you walk into a parts store and look at batteries. This is the maximum amount of draw you can put on the battery for a 30-second period at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, I know, Americans and their Fahrenheit system, it's very backwards, isn't it? Now, this should be the maximum amount you can pull out of that battery for 30 seconds before the voltage drops to an unusable level. Now, the CCA rating is really only useful for the selection of batteries for starting your engine or for winching or high load purposes where there's going to be a high load on your battery for a short period of time. The second metric that a lot of people see is amp hours. Now, they obtain the amp hours rating by multiplying the current flow in amps from the battery by the amount of time discharged. So this means if your battery can sustain 5 amps of flow for 20 hours, then they will take that 5, multiply it by the 20 hours that it consistently delivered 5 amps, and then you would have a 100 amp hour battery. Now, the problem is that manufacturers use different amounts of draw and different amounts of hours to get their amp hour rating. There is no set standard, so you would need to know the amount of amps that was drawn out of that battery and the amount of hours it was tested for to be able to put into perspective that amp hour rating. Now you have the reserve capacity. Reserve capacity is probably the most important criteria when selecting a deep cycle battery. This is a set standard. It is basically the amount of minutes that a battery can maintain a 25 amp draw on the battery. So basically the battery will be tested to see whether it can maintain a useful voltage at 25 amps for how long. This is the reserve capacity when there's no external power applied to this battery. This is a far better metric than amp hours when you are looking at getting a battery for touring, deep cycle use, running all your equipment, all that sort of stuff when you're out in the scrub. Now, the other thing you want to look at is the cycle life of battery. The cycle life is the fact as to how many times the battery can be fully discharged and fully recharged over and over and over and over and over again before actually coming to a point of failure. Now, generally, batteries built for cranking won't be able to be fully cycled to completely discharged and completely full many times before they fail. They're designed to be partially discharged and then topped up repetitively over time. Conversely, a deep cycle battery is generally designed to be discharged almost fully and recharged. Now, the issue with deep cycles is that there is the colloquial term of a memory applied to a battery. This is what deep cycles get when they're only partially discharged from, say, 100% to 70% and then top back up constantly. Every now and then, to maintain a healthy deep cycle, you will need to fully discharge that battery and fully recharge it with a battery rejuvenator. Now, how do you find out how charged your battery? Well, the easiest and most common way to do this is by use of a voltmeter. As you can see here, a fully charged 12 volt battery in a 12 volt system will be statically sitting. That means static as in no external force from an alternator or anything and no draw on it is being applied. It's sitting there static, is sitting above 12.5 volts. And then according to this chart, anything less than 11.5 volts is completely dead. That battery will be completely unusable once it drops below 11.5 volts. Now, a lot of people don't factor in that the lower your voltage drops, the higher your amps go, and this can lead to damage to items that are trying to output the same amount of watts constantly. Now, whilst your battery might be completely full at, say, 12.5 volts and completely flat at 11.5 volts, the problem is that battery will not stop working and stop providing charge once it is 11.5 volts. So, assuming you have a 500 watt light bar, at 12.5 volts this will draw from you 40 amps. And then, if it drops to 11.5 volts, you'll be drawing 43 amps. Now, that 3 amps may not sound like much, and realistically it isn't, because if you were drawing 500 watts from a 12 volt supply, you'd probably be running a 45 or 50 amp fuse. However, your battery's going to keep discharging. You've got this same 500 watt light bar still running, still pulling. It's still trying to pull 500 watts. Now it's hit 9 volts, and thus it's hit 55 amps. Now 55 amps is now where you're starting to get into danger territory. You can start damaging your electronics at this sort of thing, especially if they're not built for it. So by now, your fuse that you were fitted should have blown. But let's assume for a moment that it hasn't, and your batteries keep discharging it down to 6 volts. You're now pulling 83 amps through that same wiring because you've got 6 volts you're still trying to pull 500 watts out of that wiring and that power supply. So you're now running 83 amps through wiring that might be designed for no more than 40, 45 at a pinch. Now the other question I hear a lot of people ask is, do I want to go dual battery with an isolator, or do I want to go parallel batteries with no isolator? Well, for starters, you can't mix deep cycle and crank batteries, so if that's what you need to do, or that's what you want to do, then the answer is pretty simple, that you will need to isolate those two batteries apart. The main reasons for this is because the two batteries can't be in parallel, because the battery that is weaker for the most commonly used task will be the one that dies quicker when used for that task and will thus drag the other battery down. So if you're running parallel batteries under your bonnet, one's a deep cycle, one's a crank battery, you go out and start your car every morning, you're going to be using that deep cycle to assist the starting of the car, and thus you will kill the deep cycle very quickly. However, you can run two deep cycles or two crank batteries in parallel with each other. Now in parallel means you will double your crank amps available, you'll double your capacity available, but you will retain the same voltage. This is completely different from running in series, where you maintain the same amp rating and same capacity, but you'll double the voltage. So remember, there's a big difference between series and parallel. Now for people with a lot of room in their vehicle, they ask me, Scotty, what would you hook up in your vehicle as an optimum battery system for touring and long range, but also having reliable cranking in winter in the colder areas of Australia? Well, it's quite simple. I would install in parallel two crank batteries of about 700 crank amps under my bonnet of Betsy, and then I would use a dual battery system to hook those crank batteries isolated up to two compartmentalised deep cycle gel batteries in the boot. Now, being gel batteries, I can have them built or get them in size to fit inside my rear quarter panels, so they're completely out of the way and I don't lose cargo space area. This effectively gives me the same as a standard dual battery system, but I'll just have 4 batteries and double the capacity that I would with a standard dual battery system where a deep cycle is under the bonnet. Now you've also got to remember that some manufacturers of deep cycle batteries will not warrant their batteries if they're stored under the bonnet. Thanks for watching this episode of 4 Wheel Drive DIY, proudly brought to you by Gear Wrench Australia. If you like this video, please hit the like button below. If you want to see more great content from 4 Wheel Drive DIY, please subscribe to the channel. You can also find links to our Facebook page and its Facebook discussion group in the description below. So please, go and check them out and give us a like over on Facebook. We will also notify of new episodes and that out on our Facebook page and our Facebook group. You can also check out 4wheeldrivediy.com.au, and you can see the forum and the store where you can buy stickers on the store, and the forum where you can make your build threads, upload your GPS tracks, and show all your days out and everything. It's a great community that's starting to be built there. The forum's only fairly new, so please be patient while it builds. But please, go there, throw your stuff up and start joining the community. Now, if you want to grab awesome shirts like this, there are many other designs available. You can find a link to our TeePublic store in the description below. And as always, stay safe and happy wheeling.